Hello and welcome. You're watching FYI. I'm Rishika Barua. A shortage of semiconductor chips has crippled many crucial sectors as companies around the world are struggling to ramp up production. Well, is your car delivery going to be delayed? Will the home appliances you want to buy this Diwali not be available? All of these questions is what we will look to answer on FYI today as we look at how the chip shortage impacts you. But first, let me try and explain what are semiconductors. Essentially, they're computer chips that are made out of silicon. They're pretty much used as integrated circuits or as microchips. And, well, in a nutshell, they enable electronics to process data. They're used in almost every electronic device conceivable. From your smartphone, radio sets, LED TV sets, laptops, gaming consoles, medical diagnosis, cars, two-wheelers, home appliances, everything has this all-important semiconductor chip that is installed in it that essentially makes it work. Now, why is there a chip shortage? Well, semiconductor plants did curb production during the COVID-19 pandemic, even though experts say that this semiconductor chip shortage was long time coming and is not essentially or not only a pandemic problem. Now, what happened during this pandemic? Because of work from home, because of homeschooling, the consumer electronics demand shot up. And phones, laptops, gaming consoles, all of this was in a high demand through the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, the consumer electronic industry started stockpiling inventory of these chips. The auto sector, on the other hand, initially cut demand for these chips in the initial months of 2020 because of a complete slump in demand in the auto sector. But when demand started to normalize, the auto manufacturers, well, essentially faced a shortfall. So this is a very simplistic understanding. But a lot of different sectors have been hit, auto being the worst hit. And this is not an India problem. It's a global problem. So what really is happening and how do we get out of it? And like I said, most importantly, how does this chip shortage impact you? To make sense of these developments on FYI today, we have a great panel joining us. Siddharth Vinayak Patankar, Editor-in-Chief, Car and Bike. Venkesh Gulati, President, Federation of Auto Dealers Association. Tarun Pathak, Research Director, Counterpoint Research, and Sanjeev Agarwal, the Chief Manufacturing Officer of Lava International Limited. Thank you all very much for being with us on the show. Tarun Pathak, if I can begin by asking you to put this entire chip shortage in perspective for our viewers. Like I said at the very outset, it's a problem that's been going on, but it's been compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely right, Rishika. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. I think this is a problem that started last year, of course, started with the pandemic, but then there are various events that happened during that time. The demand and supply mismatch happened during the COVID. And for most of the sectors, there was like a V-shaped recovery. Like we talk about smartphones, this particular segment is very resilient. So the industry actually could not anticipate the kind of demand basically when it is going to come back or so, but it came back very, very strongly. Not just the demand came back, like you mentioned, the addition of the various use cases like work from home or learning from home added on to these demand for these various products. And that is something which industry didn't anticipate. And the capex of this particular industry goes on a very fixed cycles basically. If you look at the advanced nodes on which most of these products are manufactured, they happen over a period of time. But now it demands a very huge investments if we have to meet this demand. And that will happen over a period of time, and that is why we are in this middle of this situation where the demand and supply for a lot of these segments are under a mismatch.
All right. So there's clearly a demand and supply problem as we understand it. And Siddharth, if you want to come in here, there's really no quick fix to this because it's a lot more complicated than to just ramp up demand or make several of these or build several of these companies overnight that can actually manufacture the chips. But why is it that the auto sector is particularly hit? Explain that to our viewers.
Right, Rishika, good evening. And firstly, let me compliment you on sort of really putting this together perfectly at the start in terms of explaining what the problem is. So compliments to you and the FYI graphics team. Now, the idea here is to understand that there are layers to this story. Yes, the auto sector did cancel some of its existing orders, is now suffering for that. But there's one other angle to this. You see, what happens with consumer electronics, you know that everybody wants the latest phone. They want to move to the next generation chip. They want, faster processing speeds and better performance. So just the hardware requirement there of the semiconductor itself has been moving forward. I mean, today we're going to be seeing a new iPhone come out in the Bay Area that's going to use a 5 nm or nanometer chip. Mm-hmm. Most of the auto industry's requirement is still at 20 nanometers. That's now, from a consumer electronics perspective, that's a dated chip. So you see, when this huge amount of large contracts, these companies who make the chips, when they lost those large contracts and they put all their focus and attention on consumer electronics, they also upgraded themselves. They are no longer really making those old chips in those large numbers that the auto sector wants. So it's not just about setting up new facilities or getting new manufacturing capacity going, but it's about trying to get it going on technology that most of the rest of the users, other industries that need semiconductors, don't really want anymore. So it's not lucrative, it's not cost competitive. Doesn't make sense for a lot of these players to continue to make those old chips. Now, yes, over time, the auto industry will also upgrade. A lot of our ADAS and navigation and other systems of connectivity will no doubt use some of the more modern chips, and I certainly hope that happens quickly. But today, as things stand, the orders that are backed up, the kind of cars that have slowed down in manufacturing terms, models that are on sale in the market, well, they still need 20 nm chips, and that's where the real problem is. So it's not just about filling those orders; it's also who will fill those orders.
All right. I think, you've put this in perspective for us, but what does it mean for consumer electronics? And we have a representative from Lava International with us, Sanjeev Agarwal. It's been, it's been a good year in a certain sense for consumer electronics. You've seen this huge spike in demand, courtesy the work from home or the online education, but you've also created a shortage. So, what's the deal like? Are phones also now, for instance, feeling the pinch? Is the consumer electronics market also going to be facing the same crunch?
Yeah, definitely. We are facing this crunch from last more than 1 year. And as rightly shared by Siddharth also. So, actually, there is demand and supply planning issue. And as we see lately, the use of semiconductors have increased beyond consumer electronics in automobiles, in medical equipments, and in a lot of IoT products.
Right.
So there is some gap which has occurred, and due to pandemic thing, I believe only thing is that capex were delayed due to pandemic. That is the only effect of pandemic if we see. But consumer electronics is equally badly hit, and we are facing supply crunches. The prices are going up. So for many of our chips, the prices have gone up to 40-50%, and due to that, the product prices are also going up.
Right.
So it's a challenge, but I believe it will take...
So it's not just a delay. It's not just a delay. What you're essentially saying is that prices are going to go up as well. Vinkesh Gulati, is that your understanding for the auto sector as well? I know Siddharth talked about a delay. Many people are actually already facing that delay, in the market. People who are now looking to say order new cars, given this is festival season, the peak of the festival season that's about to come. Is there also going to be a price point impact as a result of this chip shortage?
So thanks, Rishika, for having me in this show. No doubt, as Siddharth said, it's a very difficult situation on the ground. Overall, the demand is huge, and the supply-demand mismatch is one which we haven't seen for at least, I feel, around 10 years. And this is growing day by day. That's a problem. We are not seeing any benefit coming out of whatever the planning the manufacturers are doing or the semiconductor chip manufacturers are doing. A vehicle which was on a waiting for 2 months, approximately 6 months back, today it is in a waiting of 4 months. So it is increasing. And actually what has happened with the pandemic, the interest in personal mobility has grown up.
Okay.
So buying a car instead of buying a two-wheeler, or buying a car instead of moving in public transport has increased. So overall, the demand has increased exponentially. whereas the supply side the issue is. And automobile, no doubt, the quality of semiconductor may be different, but I feel there are a lot of chips which are involved, starting from ABS and infotainment system and all that, and that is hurting today. And the major issue is we are at the cusp of the festival season, and from FADA we had just informed everybody that this would not be a festival for the auto dealers. It will be just a normal average sale what we do, because normally pre-festive we start piling up the inventory to support our demand. But as of today, we are sitting at 20-25 days inventory, which is a normal inventory for any car dealer. So this festival would majorly be a wash-off. It will be just as a normal month this time.
All right, and that's not good news, is it? At a time like this, when one is hoping for recovery in a lot of these sectors, this chip shortage is actually going to stall that recovery. But Tarun Pathak, if I can come to you, explain this to our viewers. One is delay, one is products becoming costlier, but the third another aspect is a shortfall. What about things like home appliances? Are there going to be a certain section of products or appliances or gadgets that are just not going to be available temporarily till the shortage is dealt with? Is that something that you're also worried about?
Yeah, so I think if you look at mostly from the consumer electronics point of view, so it will be a case of rising prices, and there will be some tweak in terms of product SKU. So we have already seen, so if you look at the entire festive season, there are companies who sell almost like 60% of their revenue actually comes from this particular festive season. And right now, if we look at anticipate the kind of demand, especially from the smartphone side, we are looking at somewhere closer to like 110 million smartphones that are going to be sold in this from July till December. But the supply side of it, the visibility we have at Counterpoint, we are seeing that we might be able to meet only 95 million of it. So there is a shortfall of 15 million. And now this shortfall is actually based on the lead times, because it's not just the components, not just the semiconductors that are getting costlier, but also the lead times to get those components. So for example, a particular component you might get in 4 to 8 weeks of placing the order. Now that lead time has gone up to almost like 20 weeks. So this planning needs to be, no one actually anticipated that coming. And what happened in this whole process, there was also a double booking kind of trend we have seen, because the bigger players, they didn't want to miss on this big festive season. So what they did is they overbooked the capacity so that they wanted to make sure they didn't fall short in terms of meeting that demand, and that leaves a big void for other players to fill, basically the smaller players. So basically it's a classic situation where you might see certain brands getting an advantage because they have a very strong supply chain mix.
Right.
Yeah.
That's actually very interesting. That it's not an equal problem for everybody. We are going to slip into a very short break on the show, but on the other side, as promised, we are going to get our panelists to answer questions on what this means for you, for your car purchase, for your smartphone. Is it going to be costlier? How much of a delay is really anticipated? And we'll also ask that million-dollar question, what's really the way out? So all that and more coming up on the other side of a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the chip shortage and what it's going to mean for you. I want to go right back to Siddharth Patankar. Siddharth, about cars, this is the time typically when people plan to buy cars, the Diwali season, the festive season, the onset of it right now. I know we're anticipating delays, but when we say delays, what are the kind of anticipated delays across segments? Is this going to be different for luxury cars? Is it going to be different for cars in the lower segments? How is it going to work?
Quite simply, Rishika, high volume cars are going to face the biggest crunch because, popular models, cars like Hyundai Creta or Kia Sonet or Maruti Suzuki Baleno, it's cars like that where we are seeing already, as Vinkesh was saying, the waiting period steadily going up the last few months. And don't forget, for the auto sector, most of the manufacturers about a year ago were already, starting to get worried about this problem. It's now that it's really come to its massive sort of crunch phase, and which is why they're announcing production cuts. It is ironic that those production cuts are happening, at a time when, yes, we gear up for the highest sales in the year. So bookings might still be robust. Let's not get that wrong. It's the angst and acrimony of the consumer that's likely, because of deliveries being pushed forward, that's where I think dealers will also face a lot of trouble. Companies for sure will also face trouble. And don't forget that some of the manufacturers will also start to play favorites in the sense they know a particular vehicle like a Mahindra XUV 700. It's all set for launch. It's the brand new car. Mahindra will prioritize that over, say, a Thar or an XUV 300. Now, in that situation, a person who books one of those other two cars is going to be told one thing today, then might get the extension of that waiting period. So really, it's a very dynamic situation right now. It's not a happy one for sure. And nobody can give you a clear answer. Not a dealer, not a manufacturer, and certainly none of us.
What about the price factor? Is that something that you foresee is going to have a long-term impact? Will there be a change in the price element because of this shortage?
Two ways to answer that. The first, of course, is whether the manufacturers are able to sign contracts at rates like they were signing in the past, or will there be a sort of make hay while the sun shines situation with chip manufacturers? So some of that will come to this, because don't forget, a lot of these contracts are long-term contracts. Yes, they may have said we don't really need this right now last year, but a lot of those manufacturers are still obligated to honor those contracts in terms of the volume projections. So that's one reason why prices, in terms of just sheer hardware, may not be affected. Where there could be a problem, that's the second part, where consumers might face some trouble, is where, sometimes because of this kind of shortage, on ground, they're willing to start paying premiums to try and get early delivery. And it's things like that which you can't really account for. A manufacturer can only control that to a certain extent, not fully.
Vinkesh Kulati, how worried, are you looking at this situation right now? Because I know Siddharth also said that it's not likely to impact bookings. But then if you're anticipating delays that could range to say 6 months or even a year in delivery of certain cars, at least in the popular segment, people might just want to wait and see, what's coming next or what's new if they're not in a hurry to buy. So is that something that you're concerned about?
So first, Rishika, I'll try to answer the question on the price front. We have seen recent price hikes. Maruti has just done it, and I am expecting once the leader does it, everybody does it. So we are expecting price hike from all the places.
Right.
So the basic question, what should a customer do as of today? Let me answer that. The customer should go to the showroom, and if he is able to get his choice of vehicle with maybe a different variant or a different line or features, I feel this is the best time to buy it and not wait for it, because I'm expecting another price increase in a week's or 10 days time. Second, because of the shortage, the gap will increase. It will not go down, at least for coming 2-3 months, what we are looking at. So maybe 3 months later, which is January onwards, we may look at supply coming to a bit easy stage, but not today.
Are you essentially saying things will get worse before they get better?
See, obviously, yes, because the festive season is where demand spikes.
Okay.
So when the demand spikes, the waiting period also goes up. So like Siddharth said, there is no problem of demand, that there is no problem of orders with us. There are a lot of orders. Even if a customer is wanting to wait to see another product which is going to be launched a month later, as a dealer, I am okay. If you want to wait, there is another person who is waiting for that car.
Right.
So as a dealer, so from the customer side, I am saying whatever option you are able to get at the dealership.
But Siddharth, what do you recommend? If someone who wants to go into the market is looking for, say, one of the popular segment cars that you talked about, does it make sense to make that purchase today? Or is it better to sort of wait and watch and see how the situation plays out?
I can't begin to tell you how many people I know, or even those I don't know who manage to get my number, call and say, hey, can you help with getting this delivery sooner than what I'm being told?
Right.
So, no, there is going to be a problem. I think a lot of consumers, they're not aware of the, background of all of this chip shortage, etc. It only affects them when they're actually sitting across the table at a dealership and being told that we're really sorry, but it's going to take a few more weeks. So what's the solution? Well, as I tell everyone who's been asking, have your favorite for sure, but also have your second, favorite car that you might want to also consider, because yes, the waiting period, if that's important to you, if you're okay to wait for 6-8 months, then that's fine. But, in some cases, people aren't ready to wait.
Well, and I think I think it's important that waiting period be factored in, given the situation that is prevailing in the market. But I also want to ask you very quickly, Sanjeev Agarwal, the biggest cause of concern at a time like this is your smartphone going to get costlier? Also, are certain smartphones, say, not going to be available? And the same question I'll ask you, is it going to vary across segments? Are the smartphones in a slightly higher price range not going to be affected or impacted more? How is it going to play out for the smartphone market?
Yeah, definitely. Like there will be a variation on the impact. So because in these times when you have supply crunch, so everybody focuses on high margin products. And if we see the products towards the higher segment, the product which priced more, so their availability will be less affected. And I believe the availability will have more effect on the middle and the downstream products because their margins are smaller. So everybody will focus on the high margin products.
All right. And are you already seeing, I know you've already said that there is going to be a price rise that's going to be anticipated, especially when it comes to smartphones. But what about, do you need to have a first favorite and second favorite when it comes to smartphones as well now? Is that going to be the order of things for the next couple of months?
Yeah, definitely. I believe because of this crunch, so customer will have to think of options. So whatever best options he can get in the desired price, so he or she should go for that.
All right. Well, we've tried to put in perspective for our viewers this global chip shortage. If you thought it's something that impacted industry, no, it is going to impact you. Unfortunately, there are going to be some delays in the cars that you want or the consumer electronics that you want. There's also going to be a price element that's going to be attached to it. So really, you need to factor all of that in come the festival season. I hope this broadcast has been useful. A big thank you to all our guests for joining us. That's all the time we have on FYI. Thanks so much for watching.